Welcoming Mr. Eric M. Bailey. How are y'all doing today?
All right, let me get this stuff set up here real quick. I've tried to practice this going fast, but we'll see how it goes. Whenever I have IT issues, I tell dad jokes. So, what was the snowman doing in the carrot patch? Picking his nose. You're welcome. All right, so one of my favorite quotes of all time comes from Albert Einstein, and he said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Now, this is often misquoted as Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. He actually never said that. He said this: "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." How are we doing now? All right, all right, you get another dad joke. That's how it works. Let's see here.
Eric, did you hear what happened when I gave away my rooster for a duck?
What happened when you gave away your rooster for a duck, Mayor?
I wake up at the clack of dawn now.
That's a good one. That's a good one. All right. So we're almost there. What do you do, Mayor? This one's back at you. What do you do if you're attacked by a bunch of clowns? You go for the juggler. Don't you worry. I'll be here all night trying to get this thing working. We practiced this earlier today, and it worked just fine. We may do it without it. It's totally fine. All right. So we cannot solve our problems without the same thing we used when we created them. Now, when I think about this, we as adults, we have this tendency, this natural desire to do things the same way we've always done them. But the problem is, if we get ourselves into trouble, and then we do things the same way, we're going to keep getting in trouble. We can't get out of trouble doing the same things that got us into trouble. Now, we've been talking about DEI for decades. For decades. And I'm not saying there hasn't been progress. There's been tons of progress. But we keep doing the same things. And we keep getting the same results. Now, there was a study that was done in 2019 that said that we, as an American population, we are more lonely than we ever have been. The survey said that about 3 out of every 5 adults is lonely. Nearly 60% of all adults say that they're lonely. That was before the pandemic. We're doing something wrong. Now, there's a new app out there called Facebook. You may have heard of it. So Facebook, if you don't know, Facebook is a social network, which is a weird term. And on this social network, when you connect with somebody, it's called friending them. And when you disconnect, it's called what? You just did this morning, didn't you? Right? So we disconnect people. We're unfriending people all the time. What happens? You have 2 people who disagree about something, usually politics. And because of this gap, because of this disconnection, we say, it's no longer worth my time or energy to acknowledge you exist. I don't want to see your kids' pictures anymore. Right? Because we disagree about something. And it's just this little gap that caused that. I've seen neighbors who have been friends for 30 years stop talking to each other because someone put the wrong yard sign out.
Come on.
We're disconnecting. We are normalizing disconnection. We're normalizing division.
Yes.
Now, this phenomenon of the unfriend is so common that the word unfriend is now in the Oxford English Dictionary. That's a problem. Now, my company, we do a lot of things all around the world, but our vision is we're here to change the way the world communicates and connects, because there is a problem with our ability to connect with each other. There's a problem, and I think that we can solve this problem. Now, the goal in all of this is not to find more ways to divide and find more us versus thems. The goal is not to find comfort in pockets of division. A lot of times we're running toward comfort. Oh, it's uncomfortable to talk with my neighbor because they put the wrong yard sign out. They disagree with me about something. So let me just stay comfortable in a pocket of division. That's not the goal. The goal is to build bridges of connection. The most meaningful conversations you will have is with somebody you disagree with. Because the only things in life we can learn are things we don't yet know. Let me say it again. The only things in life we can learn are things we don't yet know. And we're always out there trying to pretend we know everything. Stop it. Because if someone disagrees, that means they know something. They may have some context, some life experience you didn't have. There's an opportunity to learn there. That's growth potential. The goal is to build connections and build bridges. Okay. Now, I think a lot of times, what would Dr. Martin Luther King do if he were alive today? What would he say? Given this current environment we're in, what would he do? How would he behave? Unfortunately, we'll never know. Because his message of nonviolent connection, his message of empowering the oppressed was too much for those in power. We'll never know. We'll never know. But I may have the next best thing. Maybe. I was speaking at a conference a couple years ago in Atlanta. And also speaking there was Dr. Bernice King, which is Dr. Martin Luther King's youngest daughter. So have you seen the picture of him holding up a baby? Yes. That's her. Okay, she was speaking at this conference. She was on a panel. And let me rewind to tell more story because it's fantastic. So after the conference, my family actually flew out to Atlanta, and it was right at the beginning of summer. And so we rented a minivan, and we did this really wonderful week and a half long tour of the South. We did a jazz and civil rights tour of the South. It was an incredible experience for my kiddos, for me, my wife. And as we got toward the end of the loop, we were in Montgomery, Alabama. And if you ever have a chance to go to Montgomery, visit the Legacy Museum. It will rip your heart out of your chest and show you what real life is. You walk into the lobby of this museum where you buy the tickets. And on the wall are a bunch of shelves with big jars of dirt. And all the dirt's kind of different colors. And you walk up and you see labeled someone's name and a date. These are jars of dirt scooped from the place that people were lynched. Hundreds of jars of dirt. Someone did the research, and they found out who lost their lives. I mean, I'm not going to tell you all about this museum, but if you have a chance to visit, please do. It will change your soul. So anyway, we go to Montgomery, we visit this museum, and we're my family, we're kind of decompressing everything. We're having dinner out there. They're having this like nice music festival out there. And no joke, Bernice King walks by. I had just seen her a week before at this conference in Atlanta, and she walks by. We're like, that's Bernice King! And she's got her security around her and everything. And so we walk up and say, hi, Dr. King. I was just at the Atlanta conference, and she's like, oh, yeah! Gives me a big old hug. She takes pictures with me and the kids. It was a wonderful, she is as wonderful as a human being as you can ever imagine her to be. The reason I'm telling the story, though, during her session, she had a panel, and it was just three wonderful people up on the stage. And one of the gentlemen on the panel, he was giving his idea of how this world moves forward. And he says, when people are too much, there's a point when you just need to cut them out. When they're too racist, when they're too misogynistic, when they're too angry, it's time, just cut them out, move on. Focus on other people. And this is Dr. Bernice King's response. I'm going to read it to you word for word. She said, and this is very tough to do because she disagreed with him on stage in front of 5,000 people. I hear you. I respect that perspective. But I believe it's irresponsible to leave people in their hate and ignorance. Yes. I believe that no one is disposable. It's hard work, yes it is. But if you follow the trajectory of my father and nonviolence, it's about winning people over, not winning over people. It's about not becoming what they are. When we intentionally leave certain people behind, it's us against them. And we're not trying to create yet another us versus them. We're trying to create win-win pathways for humanity. We want to elevate everybody. And so I say, let's not just call them out. Let's call them in and call them up. Now, not everyone's called to do that. I get that. I respect that. But there are those of us who have that responsibility. I have that responsibility. And I hope you feel that responsibility.
Yes.
Rocked me to my core. Because there are times when I engage with people and I'm like, no, it's not worth my time and energy. I'm going to go do other work. But who is going to do the work for them? If not me, who? Now, there are moments when I don't have the energy to do so. I get it. I totally get it. If you're in this space, give yourself a pass when you don't have the energy. But when you do the work. Do the work. It's hard work. Now, there's this word out there that more often than any other word has driven division in our society over the last 5-10 years or so. It's called privilege. Now, I've been talking with folks around the world about this idea of privilege, and I ask people, I say, how do you feel when you hear the word? And I've heard the entire range of emotions. I've heard people say, it makes me angry, it makes me guilty, it makes me sad. I've heard people say, it makes me hopeful that we're talking about it. I don't feel anything, apathy. I've heard everything in between. And I think that is indicative of our problem. If we're dividing and not talking, then if I feel something powerful about just a word, and you feel something different and powerful about a word, and we never talk about it, where do we go? So I think we learn to talk about it. I think we learn how to connect in the spaces that we disconnect. And a lot of people will say, no, I don't think privilege exists because I had to work hard to earn what I have earned. I don't have privilege because I've had struggles in my life. Well, here's something that I want you to understand. Privilege in this context does not mean you haven't had struggles. Everyone has had struggles. Privilege in this context does not mean you haven't worked hard to earn what you've earned. Sometimes you earn privileges. Privilege just means that a member of a group may not have to worry about something that a member not of that group may have to worry about. That's it. It's the presence or lack of worry. That's what privilege means. So here's an example. Let's say you're a parent. Any parents in the room? Quite a few parents. All right. So if you're thinking about your role as a parent, isn't it your responsibility to give your children fewer worries than you have?
Yes, sir.
Isn't that privilege? Yes, the goal of parenting is give your children privilege. Privilege is not bad. Another example. The American dream. American dream is what? One generation doing better than the next, right? Than the previous, and moving up. That's privilege. Fewer worries as you go generation by generation. Let's say you're leading this group on a walk. We're going to walk from here to the barbecue place afterwards. And you're leading us. And you turn around to talk to somebody as you're walking and you step in a hole and you turn your ankle. Ouch. Now, being a good human being, as you're walking, limping along because you have a sprained ankle, you turn around to the rest of your group and what do you say?
Help.
Well, yeah, help, sure. But what do you say to everybody else that's still walking? Watch out for that hole. And everybody else steps over the hole and continues down the path without needing to worry about a sprained ankle. You've given us privilege. Privilege is not bad. This one word has bifurcated our society, but it's not bad. It's been weaponized. Privilege is not about us against each other. Privilege is about presence or lack of worry. Here's another example. Anyone left-handed in the room? Any left-handed people? A few of us? Okay. What are things that left-handed people have to worry about that right-handed people don't? Lefties don't say anything yet. Listen to the quietness of the right-handed people. All right, so scissors, right? Scissors. Smudging the ink when you write. Spiral on the notebook. And all the right-handed people are like, why are you worried about this stuff? Here's what happened. Because we write in English. In English, we write on the right-hand side of the paper, and we write left to right. And so us right-handed people, we rest our palm on the paper, and we glide it along before the ink goes down. Right? Left-handed people put the ink down first before their palm goes across. You ever think about that? No, because you have right-hand privilege. You've not needed to worry about it. You've never needed to worry about it. The spiral rubs against their wrist bones. The 3-ring binder rubs against their wrist bones. And so you see left-hand people, they turn their paper sideways, crane their wrist like this, and they write kind of like that. Honestly, growing up, I always thought, why do they do that? I never thought that there was a reason. It was just left-handed people are weird. That is privilege. I've never needed to worry about it. But here's something interesting. Have you ever wished you had more time? Everyone feels, I need more time. Well, here's something very interesting. 15 minutes out of every hour that you are thinking, on average, you are worrying. 25% of our thinking time is spent worrying. But here's the really interesting part. Over 95% of the things we worry about never happen. Which means about 14 minutes out of every hour, we are worrying about something that will not happen. We are already overconsumed with worry. So how could we ever possibly comprehend worries we haven't worried? This is why it's so difficult to acknowledge our own privilege. Because acknowledging our privilege is saying, I don't worry, but somebody else might. We can't comprehend. Left-handed people are weird. It's not that they're worried about something. Why would you ever worry about it? I was talking to a woman one time, and she told me that every time she walks to her car, she puts what between her fingers? Keys. I'm a male. I've never once worried about my safety walking to a car. Ever. And so it made no sense to me. Why would you do that? Who would worry? That's privilege. But it's very easy to see other people's privilege, isn't it? Look, if I had your money, I wouldn't have to worry about this, or this. If I had your job, I wouldn't have to worry about this, or this. If I had your time, if I had your car, if I had your whatever resource. It's easy to see other people's lack of worry. Hard to see our own. And so this conversation about privilege, it's not about division. It could be about empathy. If someone says, I think that's privilege, we should say, oh, what might somebody else worry about that I don't? What might somebody else worry about that I don't? And here's the thing. If you have a hard time saying, I have privileges, just practice. Think about any attribute about yourself and say privilege after it. Curly hair, privilege. Okay, well, what would be a curly hair privilege? You never have to curl your hair. People with straight hair spend so much time curling their hair. My mom is half Japanese. She is 5 foot nothing. And she's like, I wish I was tall. I was like, Mom, tell me about your short privilege. She's like, there's no privilege in being short. I'm like, well, does anyone ever ask you to get something off the top shelf? You never have to worry about that. Infinite numbers of privileges. Infinite numbers of privileges. And that's the thing I want us to reframe these conversations, because it's not about finding more ways to find us versus them. It's about how we can engage each other as humans. Engage each other and connect with each other. Now, as we think about this, the way to move forward, I want to introduce this phrase called radical curiosity. So radical curiosity is this concept that I created that essentially we want to try to understand the human across from us. Understand the context around us before expecting to be understood. Now, this is really, really difficult, because a lot of times we find ourselves in arguments and debates, and when we're in arguments and debates, what do we say? La, 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 okay, my turn. But we're not listening, are we? We're just waiting for our turn to talk, because we want to be understood. Sometimes we'll even say, I've heard this out loud from myself.
I'm willing to hear you, but you need to understand this first. I'm willing to hear you, but you need to hear me first. And if both people are doing that, no one's listening, we will never reach understanding. We'll never be resolved. And that's how most of our conversations happen. You need to understand me. You need to understand me. And the other person's like, well, you need to understand. Just go back in circles. What if we let go of our desire to be understood and we said, hey, let me try to understand you. Let me try to understand where you're coming from. Help me understand. Teach me. Lowering your power in a conversation lowers their defenses. And that's powerful. So when we start to really engage each other with radical curiosity, we can start building connections. Start really building connections. Now, I believe that it is through radical curiosity. I believe that it's through understanding, that it's through connections, that we can overcome this momentum of division and disconnection. The work ahead of us is not easy. It is hard work. But instead of quitting when the work gets hard, ask yourself, can I do hard things? Can you do hard things? Yes. The only way to do hard things is to be faced with hard things. I was talking with someone just recently and they said, this new generation, they just quit when it gets hard. We've been saying that about the younger generation for thousands of years. There is actually a quote from Aristotle that said the younger generation is so conceited. Just timeline-wise, Aristotle was before Jesus. The work is hard, right? The road is long. There's not a quick finish line. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. The tunnel is the work. We got to keep doing the work. But when we do hard things, we can change the world. Thank you all very much.